Hello and welcome. I'm Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you're doing well today. All right, and in today's case, we'll be looking at the DB Cooper mystery. And in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at three prime suspects, and that would be Robert Dragstral, Sheridan Peterson, and Richard McCoy Jr. Now, I would ask you to watch till the end because I believe there is another player involved in this case and a serious twist in the tale. All right, let me take a moment to focus and tune in. All right, so I'm going to start off with Robert Dragstral, born October 16, 1943. That gives him a 10-1 from October, the 16-7 on the day of his birth, and the year was an outcome 8, which gives him the 88-16-7. Now, I would just say, someone that is involved in aviation or flight, you tend to want to see a lot of sevens, although he does have the outcome 7 life path. So that already makes him a strong character. Now, what I've done is I've started with the day before and the day after to see if we pick up enough pings on this character. So we see on the day before with that 16-7, now that pings directly onto Robert Dragstral with that 16-7. Really puts him, pings on him the day before of the incident. We see the 7-9, the 7 pings on his 7. And I would just say very likely character, or likely suspect, let's rather say, the day before. And I've also included then the discovery of the money, which was February the 10th, 1980. And we see his October 10-1 pings on the 10-1 of the day, and very little else pings on that. But if we look at November 24, 1971, there's very little there, to be quite honest, that pings on Robert directly. Yes, we have the 8s and the single 7. That 17-8 does tell me solo jumper, that 1, the 7, and the 8. And of course, that brings him quite close to what the, what I'd be looking for in seeing if this guy was actually the direct suspect. Now, what's interesting is, and I'm going to show this, and this is why I ask you to watch till the end, because I believe that 16-7 the day before is going to play a very important role in this case. That 16-7 is going to play an important role when I present all three prime suspects, and I am going to put all three suspects together on the day plus one other prime suspect that through my research I've identified that not necessarily has been considered in this case. And the intention is not to start another theory, but a likely suspect in this case. Okay, so as an overview, very little that connects Robert Dragstral to this case, although the Netflix guys, or the guys that produced the series for Netflix, were very adamant that Robert Dragstral was the guy. Now, very little pings on him, so I don't believe, quite honestly, that Robert Dragstral was the DB Cooper, and very little connects him on the day, although prevalent in the day before, which is actually going to play a very significant role coming up to the conclusion of this episode. All right, so I'm going to go on to Sheridan Peterson. Now, Sheridan Peterson has a lot more pinging on each of the days either side, as well as when the money was discovered, okay? So we'll notice that his date of birth being May the 2nd, 1926, gives him the 5 from the month, the 2 of the day, the 18-9, with the outcome 7 and 9, 16-7. Now, if you look at his date of birth and the -1, November the 23rd, 1971, it's almost, in fact, it's an identical match except for the 11-2, 23-5. Other than that, it still pings on his numbers. Everything is identical. I mean, had the event taken place on the November 23rd, I would say this is the guy for sure, without a reservation of doubt. This is the guy. Now, what perturbs me is that if we go to the actual day of the hijacking, November 24th, 1971, he does have the 89, which is very significant actually. And we also have the 9 in the same position. You can see the two blue 9s. However, the outcome 17.8 does tell me that this character is not the guy we are looking for. However, I'm going to raise this point again. Keep your eye on November 23rd, 1971. I think we have a very interesting situation here, and through my research, that was alarm bells for me, as well as telling me something else was going on here. And if we look at when the money was discovered, we have the 89 again, as well as the 2. But very little else pings on that day. And the actual day that the event happened, very little connects there, where I would want to see the connection, the outcome of the day. And again, the day after, he's there as well, the 2, the 7, 89, 9, 89. So, had this event taken place on November 23rd, 1971, I would definitely say Sheridan is definitely the character involved. Now, you will have noticed by now that with Sheridan and Robert both ping on the day before, which started to pique my interest a little bit. Why would these characters be so strong on the day before? Okay, and I'll get to that in a minute. So let's go over to Richard McCoy Jr. This guy for me is the number one candidate. Okay, born December 7, 1942, which gives him the 12-3. We've got a lot of 7s there, very much aviation orientated. We have the 10-1-7 and we have the 17-8. Now, if we look at the actual day of the event, we have an outcome 17-8, which Richard McCoy has. He has the 8, which he has the 8 as well. And of course, there's very little else on that day that connects him. We see the 7 the day before, which is all about preparing for the aviation, also about justice, injustice. But for me, Richard McCoy with the outcome 17-8 and the day of the event has a 17-8. And I believe this makes him a very likely candidate. And if we look at the discovery of money on February 10, 1980, he has the 10-1 and he also has the 12-3. So that makes him even closer to that day of the money being discovered. And more importantly, it puts him directly at the scene of November 24, 1971. So for me, this guy plays a critical role. And I would say very much the number one probability of Richard McCoy being D.B. Cooper. And we know a few months after that, he actually hijacked another plane, which is commonly known. And similar MO, similar situation, but was obviously arrested a few days after the hijacking and was brought into custody. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, I believe there was another role player in this case. Okay, now we must appreciate that this was during 1971. Aviation was still fairly new, and clearly the laws around aviation were very lax, that someone could take on a briefcase with a bomb, whether it was real or not. And I believe there was something else going on this day, and this is kept on pinging and bringing up during my research and investigation into this case. And I must say, I did look at all the other characters, and I do have a slide of them. For example, Theodore Braden Jr., there's Lynn Doyle Cooper, and the Walter Rica. So I didn't find many other examples that were really close to the actual day of this incident. Now, I'm by no means a conspiracy theorist, although I do listen to conspiracy theories. I like, because there's always a little bit of truth somewhere. However, doing my research, it just felt like something was going on that day before, the 16-7. And it just felt like there was something else going on here. And I believe this is the answer. So if we include the CIA and the CIA director at the time, Richard Helms, it starts to paint a different picture around the situation, okay? Because we need to ask ourselves, how does I'm going to call it an operation, not a hijacking, an operation, go so smoothly with very little clues? And I mean, 30, 50 years later, it is still unsolved. And when you have these kind of situations, it usually points to higher powers involved with the ability to squash truth or hide the truth, and also interference into cases. Now, as mentioned, we've looked at Richard McCoy's details. Now, let's look at the CIA on their own. They definitely have the 18-9, which is the year that this situation happened in. We have the 18-9 outcome on November the 25 as well, and ever present in these cases, or let's say ever present on the day before, the day, and the day after. We also have the 18-9 present on the day of the discovery, as well as the outcome 12-3. Now, coincidence or not, I don't know. So very prevalent in the day leading up, the day, and the day after. Now, if we had to bring in the director, Richard Helms, that 11-2 is present on all 3 days. On the day before, we have the 5, which is present with Richard Helms. And we have the 9, which is very much present with the CIA. And if we look on the actual day, the 11-2 pings on Richard Helms. Now, why did this happen? I kept on getting the impression the following happened. I believe in some arbitrary way, or not, you wouldn't think logically this is the way to solve issues, but I believe the CIA were trying to point out the frailties or the security loopholes in airport control, aviation control, and I believe, and I know this sounds a bit far-fetched, I believe they were forcing the aviation industry to have a look at their security operations, their security processes, because we know that flight was so in its infancy, and there were a lot of security breaches that were happening and were happening. Okay. What also makes me believe this was a co-op, in other words, there were other players involved. Okay. Now let me go to the next slide. Now the next slide includes everyone: Robert, Richard, and Sheridan. Now, like I say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but my numbers and my intuition and the impressions I was getting, something bigger was at play here. This wasn't a simple hijacking like you would see Richard a few months later trying to hijack a plane on his own, and I have the theory around that as well. But on this day, I believe an operation was taking place, and there were several people put on standby. In other words, there were several players who were involved in this, but ultimately, as we know, history tells us there was only one person that actually hijacked the plane. And I strongly believe, okay, that this was an operation with several players involved, and let's say several operatives involved, all on standby. Because I find it very interesting that the main characters, Robert Dragstral as well as Sheridan Peterson, were pinging on the day before. Okay, and if we look at the actual day, we obviously only see Richard there. And what also drew my attention to the situation is, and if we look at the event -1, event, and event +1, is the number 23-5 on event -1. That is a collective. Okay, that is a collective. Then we see again on the 24, also it was a collective. 24-6 as well on the November 24. That is a collective as well. And then we see November 25, that is a collective as well, where we see that authority number 7. So in my opinion, I believe there was an operation going on here. And like I said, I don't mean to start other theories, but I believe CIA had a hand in this operation, most directly, and we see their details on the right with the CIA director. I believe this was a complete and total operation, and we know that no one was injured, no one was hurt, and yet they got away scot-free. And there's only one way you get away scot-free in this situation, is that you have a higher power like the CIA. And I did look at the FBI numbers, but nowhere near, in fact, hardly ever a match. And when I got to the CIA date of birth, their launch, as well as the CIA director at the time, their numbers are pinging all over the place here. Okay? They are pinging all over the place. So I believe this was an operation by the CIA with selected agents, undercover agents, in Robert Dragstral, Richard McCoy, Sheridan Peterson. Okay? Now, the one other question that remains, okay, is then why did Richard McCoy hijack another plane several months later? And I believe the answer is he acquired this information, knowledge about airplanes, about the operation, and went solo. Okay? Or we can say he went rogue. Now, what confirms this for me is the day that Richard McCoy was shot and killed, which was November 9, 1974. So if we look there, 1974 has the 12-3, which also pings on Richard, but it pings directly on the CIA. We have the 11-2 of November, which pings directly on Richard Helms. All right, and we have the 3. So if we look at November 9, 1974, the second row, 11-2-3, pings on the CIA as well, even though he was shot and killed by the FBI because he started shooting at them. I strongly believe the CIA had a hand in locating Richard and also informing the FBI where to find Richard McCoy. Okay, I don't believe it's a coincidence that on the day that he was killed, that the CIA and the director CIA, Richard Helms, all their numbers pinged directly on that day. Okay, so I believe he was a rogue agent that attempted to hijack a plane on his own, with his own steam and knowledge, and I believe the CIA had a hand in locating and ensuring that he would be killed on that day. I know it sounds a little bit far-fetched, but when you have that amount of numbers pinging on that person from the CIA and CIA director on Richard McCoy, that is not a coincidence. And again, we see the 17-8 outcome of his date of birth directly linked to the 17-8 of the actual day of the hijacking. So to summarize it, I believe there were multiple agents training or practicing to do this, waiting in the wings to see who would be called up for the actual day. And I believe in this case, Richard McCoy was called up, and I do believe that Robert Dragstral as well as Sheridan Peterson had prior knowledge of this event. And very significant, and no coincidence that they ping on the day before, I believe, because I kept on asking myself then, why would they have the 16-7? It was almost like they were in the same room on the day before the event, like they might have been waiting in a hotel room, let's say, for example, right? So for the sleuths, this would be something interesting to look into, whether this is the case, but according to me, it's no coincidence that the day of the event, the CIA numbers all ping on Richard and his death, that we have Robert as well as Sheridan pinging very strongly on the day before, and this baffled me for a while. So I believe there was a bigger operation at play here, and it wasn't so much about the money, but it was pointing out the flaws in the security of the aviation industry. So to wrap it up, I believe this was an operation by the CIA, carried out by the CIA, and there were several operatives involved. And the ultimate operative that would do the actual event was Richard McCoy Jr. All right, let me know what you think. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button. And I would just say stay safe and stay alert, and I'll see you in the next one.